Okay, here we are, Matthew Russell Lee, Inner City Press, here at the Southern District of New York Courthouse today, Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. Now, we're on the way to what will be a pretrial conference in the Rudy Giuliani collections case. His bench trial begins in 2 days on the 16th. This is about the rings and the condos. Now, my understanding is he's actually not going to come to this pretrial conference, but there's been some developments in the case. He was barred yesterday by Judge Lyman. 2 of his witnesses were barred from trial because of discovery abuses, according to the order. And they filed an appeal. Joseph Camerata filed an appeal, interlocutory appeal of the banning of the justices. Whether this is going to put off the trial, I don't know. I don't think so. I think Judge Lyman is set on this date. So we'll be we'll have a live stream, hopefully just after this goes up. In other news, I'm going to do something on censorship and the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, because I've just spent the entire morning dealing with an abuse of that. But yesterday, in the cases against Sean Combs, the Busbee firm filed, probably in many of the cases, their justification for anonymity of the plaintiffs, John and Jane Doe. We'll see how many judges go along with that. Eric Adams and the prosecutors were told to stop with the out-of-court statements by Judge Ho in that case. In the Nadine Menendez trial upcoming, it turns out that Nadine is not agreeing to any stipulations. Now the government says there's going to be 90 witnesses and the trial will take 10 weeks. Seems a bit excessive, but we'll just have to see. We also covered yesterday the sentencing to time served of murderous mayor of Copan, El Paraíso, Copan, in Honduras, Alexander Ardon Soriano, who testified against Juan Orlando Hernandez. Very quietly, he was sentenced to time served. He was going to be released from jail. I don't think he's going back to Honduras. They said it's too dangerous for him there. Now, let me turn to the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, because it's too much. In 2020, there in the Southern District of New York, I covered an insider trading case against Sebastian Pinto-Thomaz. He was convicted at trial. I bear him no ill will. I just covered the trial. That was that. Now, beginning around in December, last month, I began to get emails from an account calling itself Pinto-Thomaz, saying, look, I respect your website, but these articles are hurting me when people find them online. And I get those requests, and sometimes I accommodate them as much as I can, but I don't go with censorship, and I don't take things down. But I could tell there was something. He quickly escalated to a threat under something called POPIA, a South African privacy law. He said, as a citizen of South Africa, which I never knew he was, I have a right to be forgotten. It's sort of like there's a European law that's like that. It's very anti-First Amendment, actually. It's very strange. But in this case, it's totally off base, because the guy was convicted in a federal trial, and his name is still on the DOJ website. So I don't really understand what he thought he could accomplish. So I didn't answer that. Well, this morning, I received a complaint under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, in which a seemingly unaffiliated website says that they published the article in 2020 and mine must come down. Now, the way that law is written, you actually do have to take it down, apparently, while it's I filed a counterclaim just basically for the right to keep put the article back up. But I felt the need to say, this is a fraud. I can tell it's the same article that Mr. Pinto-Thomaz was writing about, and now suddenly, just by coincidence, a website in California that's done this before, that's a separate story that I'm not going to get into, at least at this point, writes in and says, we published the article. It's totally false, because they never write about SDNY, and whatever. I've written in, including the request about POPIA. And the thing is, the problem with that law is that there's no repercussions for attempted to use and abuse DMCA for censorship. This first happened when I was in the United Nations, and a reporter then of Reuters, now of Human Rights Watch, used the DMCA to get removed from Google search an email of his trying to get me thrown out of the United Nations. It was nothing to do with copyright. It was just embarrassing. But it should have been embarrassing to both of the two aforementioned organizations that Lou Charbonneau filed a DMCA complaint to get his own email, which I had obtained through journalistic ways. It's not copyrighted. It's insane. It's an insane thing. So DMCA abuse will become, I didn't want to go down this road, but here we are. Now, I'm going to finish it off because I've got to get into the Rudy Fest right down the street. What I can say is that here's the rare SDNY UN connection. There were additional filings in the UNRWA, cases against UNRWA, by survivors and family members of the deceased of October 7th. And they've used the word fraud in connection with Philip Lazzarini and Antonio Guterres. You can find it, and I think that I think it's true. I think that they what they're trying to say is that Guterres said publicly, we're going to get to the bottom, we're going to hold accountable any UNRWA staffer that participated on October 7th. And now in court they're saying nobody's going to be accountable, screw you, we're immune. And his lawyer, Sirpa Soares, returned copies of the complaint. Absolute lawless behavior by the United Nations. So sorry that this is a kind of an outraged one, but there it is. Inner City Press, to be continued.